In the fashion industry, there are three types of businesses that produce merchandise, right? So one are manufacturers. I'm including designers in there because they're the manufacturers, contractors, and retailers. And of course, manufacturers, they design, they create, produce, and market, um, and distribute their lines on a on a continual basis. So designers are in that, right? So this manufacturer could be a designer who owns a company or a company that employs designers. But manufacturers typically own their own factories, but they may use contractors to construct their products. So that's what we did at Ralph. We had contractors that did our production for us. But the growing area in retail is products development, that the manufacturer establishes a product development division to service its clientele of retailers. So I worked for a brand, so Ralph was a brand, but oftentimes you'll see things in Forever 21, and you'll see a similar print in a store like Fashion Q. We'll get to that in a second. It's called private label. So Forever 21 does design some of its own goods, but it also buys from manufacturers who does the product development and then just puts a Forever 21 private label on. And we'll talk about private labels in a slide or two from here. So factories that are owned by manufacturers, right? Contractors, right? What do contractors do? Contractors are factories that make and finish goods. Sometimes they're domestic, so they're in the United States, but more often than not, they're offshore, and in a host of places, right? That they could be, but usually they are in emerging economies where labor laws are different, right? And the cost of living may be lower, and wages and salary expectations are not the same as they are in the United States. But conversely, living conditions aren't the same either. The reason why so many things have gone offshore is to reduce the cost to us, right? So if you remember American Apparel, their motto was made sweatshop free in downtown LA. But a T-shirt at American Apparel was also $30, right? So it's this is also one of those fashion dilemmas, like, right? So like fast fashion, and some of the sustainability and environmental issues around fashion is that things are produced offshore in order to make them less expensive for us, right? But as a result of them being produced offshore, what does that do for the cost of living for those people that are producing them? So something for you to think about, okay? The other thing is our buyers for retailers, right? So in the product development steps slide, that long description that I gave, I talked about what we did, right, at Ralph Lauren. And in this case, retailers are businesses that sell their products to consumers, and it could be brick and mortar, brick and click, which just means they have a physical presence, but they also have a established online presence, and then companies that are 100% online. So buyers buy for these companies. Sorry, buyers buy for these different parts of their organization, and they are in the product development department, right? So I never worked there, but I interviewed twice for PacSun. I almost worked at PacSun, and actually I didn't even want. It wasn't even PacSun. It was they used to have a chain of stores called Demo, which was their urban. I hate to say it, but that's what it was. It was their urban division. It was at the time when Sean John and Fat Farm and Triple Five, those were Echo, were big. So they actually had an in-house production staff that made some store brands as well. I'm happy I didn't go work for them because I ended up someplace much better. But so retailers, right? Buyers for retailers also are really involved in the product development process. And depending on the size of the company, they may have a product development team that starts and then does the warm handoff to the buyer, or the buyer starts and does the warm handoff to the production staff and then gets it back when it lands in the United States. And that's how it was at Ralph. We did all of the product development components. We went through books and we had binders and binders of inspiration, of CADs that we could use, and we pulled those together, created our color story, told our story for the season, picked fabric, trim, got a sample made sure it fit okay, right? Approved the sample, started production. Once we started production, it was out of our hands. It went to our production team, and then when it hit the warehouse, then it was back in our hands, right? Okay. The other way that that product development works for buyers is what is known as a decentralized buying process. And what that does is there is a head buying team that makes selections of garments that fulfills the mission, that fulfills the trend, the inspiration of an organization for a specific season, and then the buyers in that area can pick what they would like to carry. So when I made my correlation back, talking about how Ralph had hot, cold, and island stores, what a decentralized buying structure does is it would have, for instance, I'll use Nordstrom's again because I work there. I'll use Nordstrom. So Nordstrom has a California buying team. They have a buying team for Texas. They have a Midwest buying team. They have a buying team for the South Atlantic. So that includes Florida, North and South Carolina. They have an East Coast buying team, right? So the GMMs and some senior level buyers select the vendors they're going to use and the garments that are acceptable out of that vendor's line for that season, and then the buyer gets to drill down and pick the pieces that they want that they know will sell in their area, right? So we know that the United States is a large and diverse country, and I've had the benefit of living on the East Coast and the West Coast, and what sells in California doesn't always sell in New York, and what sells in New York doesn't always sell in California, right? So so the decentralized buying process is really important, especially for really large chains. So again, if I use Forever 21 as an example, the number of sweaters Forever 21 is going to have in November in, let's say, the store in Ontario Mills is going to be very different than the number of sweaters they're going to have a store in Chicago, right? So decentralized buying does that. It doesn't just allow a buyer to blanket buy for an entire company. It allows them to pick and choose based on what that company's primary customers are going to purchase during that season in their geographic location. Okay, so again, for Ralph, we did it all, but at Nordstrom's, they do have a regional buy team, and even in categories. So in children's shoes, they have a regional buy team because we had to buy snow boots when I lived in New Jersey, right? Snow boots were always in our mix, whereas in California, they always had an open toe sandal, right, in the mix, because that's what their customers are going to buy. All right, so those are the parties in the product development process. Now the question is why, right? Why did retailers become designers? And there are four main reasons why retailers moved into the business of developing their own product lines or products, right? So first, retailers just wanted to be able to satisfy specific customer demands, right? This is what all good retailers do, right? They identify their target customer, their target market, and then they sell the products that these people want. And if we think back to our marketing mix, right? We think back to the marketing mix. There were four components of the marketing mix. Hopefully you're naming them in your head right now, right? But two of them were product and price. So by creating the products that they know that their customers want, they can also control the price. And then they have it in the right place and they do the right promotions, right? So that's all four pieces of the mix. So really just to satisfy customer demands. The next thing is to have some exclusivity, right? To define who they are and who their customer is. So so if I say Zara, you have an idea of what a Zara store looks like. If I say Banana Republic, you have an idea of what a Banana Republic store looks like. And you can only get banana things at Banana, and you can only get Zara things at Zara, right? So just having merchandise that's 100% unique to that customer. And part of the reason that they do that is because there are a limited number of manufacturers, but oftentimes you can see a similar style in Forever 21 and maybe a store like Fashion Q, right? So in order to keep yourself from seeing yourself coming and going, there's some exclusivity. I grew up in the 80s, and as a kid, there are like 6 places that my mom and my mom's friends shopped at. So there are plenty of times where I showed up to school and my friend had the same outfit on as me. And now it's very, 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 very rare that I show up someplace and I have something on that one of my friends has that we bought independently of each other. So we might be together shopping and have the same thing, or they be like, "Girl, where you get that from?" Right? And I tell them and they go get it. But it's rare that we have independently shopped and bought the same thing because we generally shop in different places. So that exclusivity, right? That's really, really important, right? Here's the thing: the retailers want to make more money, and by controlling the products that they buy, they cut out that wholesaler, they cut out the middle person. So they're coming directly from the factory, and they're able to make more money off of it. In all honesty, they product development just provides higher profit margins. So I'm going to tell you something that's going to freak you out. When I worked for Ralph, for the outlet division, when I started working for Ralph, we sold the slim fit ladies polo shirt. It was $29.99. We paid for it, and this was in 2002. 2002, we paid $8.54 for that shirt from the factory, right? So we paid $8.54 for it. We sold it for $29.99. So we made about 21 bucks per shirt. And then we got a new GMM, and he's like, I think we could push the price on this because the full store price is $65. So we were selling for less than half. So we took the price up from 29 to 34, and it still sold. And we took it up from 34 to 39, and it still sold. And we took it up from 39 to 44, and then we saw a drastic dip in our price. So we parked the price at $39.99 because that's what the customer was willing to pay for it, and made a boatload of money on that shirt. So even when we marked it down to half price, we still made more than 50%. So just being able to control that price is what private labels in-house production does, right? You reduce the lead time because the next thing is you reduce the lead time. And you do that because you're in control, right? You're in control of everything. So when I was at Ralph, our production time was 8 months. So from the time we placed an order, from the time we started our inspiration, right? We started inspiration board to the time it was in the store was 8 months. And for some of our items, it was less time than that. So for some of our items, some of our staple items were the women's polo shirt in specific colors. So white, black, khaki, pink, actually 2 shades of pink. Those were our staple colors. We always had those in stock. And then we also had a cotton sweater. So we always had white, navy, and gray and black in stock. So those, our lead time was only 2 months. So we could place an order, and in 2 months we could have that order in the store. So that lead time, right? And then we've been talking about fast fashion a lot. And it's just that apparel that is created to fit a trend, right? So they are at lower prices, but they're fast because you can get them in the store and out of the store very, very quickly, right? And then the final reason that that companies do this is to, provide some private label merchandise. So is to provide a high fashion looking garment at a mass market price, right? I hope that makes sense, right? So take inspiration from a designer, something that is really fashionable, and translate that into something that anybody could buy. Now, I'm not talking about a knockoff. A knockoff is different. Well, I'm talking about a knockoff in a second. But to create something that looks high end at a more reasonable price, and also, part of that objective is to create modifications of items that have already sold really well, and just be able to reproduce them, right? So when we were getting our inspiration at Ralph, we would look at some of their best-selling. Ralph has a couple different lines. So he has Blue Label, Black and Purple, and Blue Label is his moderately priced. That's in my air quotes. It was his moderately priced at the time. But we would look at best-selling Blue Label and Black Label items. Purple was collection. We could never reproduce those, but we would look at Blue Label and Black Label, their best-selling items, and see how we could translate those into items that would sell for $100 or less, or for some of the coats would be $200. But in order to recreate things that sold really well, and sometimes recreating things that you bought from a third party that sold really well. So I've been talking about Ralph, but Macy's may take a dress that Tahari made and create a version of it because it sold really well and put a private label of it. Okay. So sometimes, at the start of this, many of the garments were actual knockoffs of other garments. But a knockoff is a copy of another style that also uses the same trademarks as another company. In the early 2000s, Banana Republic got in trouble because they knocked off a Gucci bag. So Gucci made a bag that had a bamboo handle on it. So it was a nylon bag with a bamboo handle on it, and then it had a GG metal closure. And Banana Republic took the exact same bag, and all they did was take the closure off of it, and knocked it off. And in all honesty, if you had the Gucci bag and it was turned inside so you couldn't see that it had a GG on it, and you looked at the banana bag, it looked like the same bag. So that was actually knockoff. There was a whole lawsuit. There was a lawsuit around it. Banana lost. Actually, Banana settled because they admitted that they did knock it off. But companies do have private label merchandise. So brands like Target, right, has private labels. So they have their I'm trying to think. Fable and something, I can't remember what it's called now. I probably have too much. Oh, they have Who What Wear. That's one of the things. I have quite a few items from Target. So they have private label. JCPenney's has its Stafford line. Every now and then they'll bring a designer in to work with. Kohl's has its own private line. So those are private labels. That's merchandise that the retailer developed and assigns to a collection, right? So it's a collection. It's a brand name, but it's their own brand. So, right. So, retail-driven product development really has matured and has come into its own to the point that some of us we see private label brands as a brand. So if you think of, that the international concepts at Macy's, the INC, like it's a brand, but it's a Macy's brand, right? If we think of, like I said, Target Who What Wear, it's a Target brand, but it's a brand. And Target really has done a great job moving into the private label business on their apparel side, right? So they used to be mostly external labels, but they've done a really good job of translating their private labels into really affordable but high quality. I feel sometimes I'm like, they are giving Macy's a run for their money at this point. So that 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 is really important in the retail industry. As the product development team is working, right, they are working with a couple of different branding approaches. And as an in-house brand, they do need to work on how the line is going to be branded. So first, there's a design driven brand, which is more about artistic vision and personal sense of taste. These type of brands appeal to customers who relate to a designer's aesthetic, and tend to identify with the brand name. So if we think of, of things like some of Target's collaborations that it has with designer brands. So if we think about their collaboration with Missoni, like every time it comes out, it flies off the shelf, right? Because it's a design driven brand. So the next thing is merchandise filling brands. So these are also known as void filling brands, right? They just see a void, something that the customer wants and needs, and they fill it in, right? So these styling decisions are really based, really careful on past successes and failures, past sales successes and failures, in conjunction with what customers' desires are, right? So, in for a merchandise-driven brand, it's really the marrying of customer comfort and competitive prices. Those are the most two important things for these type of brands. And the last branding approach that product developers come up with, right? That retail product development comes up with is what's known as cross shopping, and that just means that a customer has an inclination to purchase a wide variety of products across various brands, directly from a vendor. So I'm going to use Target as an example. Again, if we use Target has a couple of in-house brands, right? They have some design-driven brands and they have some merchandise-driven brands. So when I mentioned, their collaborations with designers like Missoni, that's a really design-driven brand. And then they have some merchandise-driven brands, which is like, what is the t-shirt brand at Target called? It escapes me right now, right? But they have some merchandise-driven brands that are just basics, right? Just basic t-shirts, basic joggers, basic leggings. And their goal is that a customer will come into the store for the Missoni item, but then they'll buy a white t-shirt or tank top to go underneath it, right? So they'll do some cross shopping, or they'll come in and buy a pair of joggers and then also find something that is design driven, that's design inspired. And I mean, honestly, Target had a bunch of, I love a puff sleeve. I love a puff sleeve. Target had a bunch of puff sleeve sweaters and sweater dresses and shirts, last winter, and I went a little crazy. Because they were design driven, but they were also basic items. So if I buy a puff sleeve cardigan, I need what to go underneath it. I need a dumb tank top, right? So, so that piece to that cross shopping piece.